Hey guys, this will be video 5 for the how to restore a 81 Gibson Explorer and probably just about any type of guitar for that matter. In video 4, I was kind of high strung doing the whole epoxying the top down and everything, so I was really just kind of going off the cuff through that whole thing, and it was cool. It worked out really well. I didn't make any mistakes, of course, but I didn't get to pause and talk about theory and all that jazz. And one of the most important things I forgot to cover, which it's not a big deal, but and I'll talk about the epoxy here in a little while, and then the tap tones, and then we're going to weigh it and compare it to what we started out with as a dry guitar. That way we can determine how much did the actual epoxy itself weigh, and then the binding and all that jazz. But when you're doing all of your glue up, because you're gluing the top down, and because of the whole workspace, everything about how you're doing your clamping, if it's with like cabinet clamps, because see, I have some cabinet clamps that they're like 14 or 16 inches long, so they're really, really tall. But the whole idea about once you get the guitar clamped up, right now gravity is not to your advantage. It's not really that big of a deal, but what I'm talking about is the possibility of clogging internal channels with excess epoxy. Now, I've done it enough that the amount of epoxy that I applied, I knew it wouldn't have been a big deal if I had just clamped it up like this and just allowed any sort of spillover in that channel. Primarily that channel right there, is because that's the only one that I don't have access to. That even if it had have compressed out and run down, it would have just run down the sidewall. But the beauty about the 24-hour cure epoxy is, like, within let's say 45 minutes to an hour, I had the job absolutely 100% finished, and any amount of excess that might have been squeezing out on the sides. Remember, I had the tape down here protecting the mahogany, such as like that right there. So it really wasn't that big of a deal to have a cloth, and kind of wipe any excess off that I had. But even if the epoxy ran down on the mahogany down here, you're going to be doing some sanding and scraping. But where I'm going with this is, after I knew, okay, it's a job well done. I've got a 3/8 inch drill bit right here. I've got my block in here, and everything's aligned, and I have a beautiful perimeter around the entire footprint. Now all you do is get ready to flip the lights out and turn it into a coffee table. And what I mean by that is, now gravity is to your advantage, and then any excess that is in that channel right there is now going to just kind of puddle and flow into the actual top and create a bit of an eased edge in there, or like a coved edge around any sort of perimeter work. Now, this is really important, and I learned this from doing like chambered guitars. I'm talking like engineered chambered guitars, like the Gretsch or the Les Paul replicas that I build, where I'm doing really calculated, massive, weight relief. Well, you got to make certain that epoxy in there doesn't run down in like a little ball, and then one day the guitar takes a brutal shock, and for some strange reason that little ball of epoxy now breaks loose and it's in there rattling around. So with this right here, by flipping it over, any epoxy that's in there will now run down onto the top, which already has epoxy on it, and it will guarantee that you don't have any little potential breakaway, or you just don't have any clogged channels and all that jazz. So you guys get the drift. But when you're doing heavily chambered body guitars, you got to be really aware of that stuff. And I'll show this guitar briefly because it kind of applies to what Ed and I are talking about. But this is a hollow body Flying V that I designed and built designed it a long time ago, but started building it probably a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago, maybe, however long. There's some videos on this, but inside this guitar, it's got all the tone bars, and every bit of that was done. And then, but once it got glued together, I had no access into any of these channels to make certain that it was clean. So once this top got epoxy down, it got flipped over like that, like a coffee table, and it sat overnight. And then the epoxy. And I remember doing a video talking about this. The beauty about this, the amount of epoxy that was in there, what you see is exactly what pressed out. None of that was like cleaned up and whatnot. So very clean job. But the reason I show that is because I did talk to Ed, Eric's friend, and Ed was really cool. He knew exactly what type guitar he wants me to build, and it's basically going to be very similar, if not near. Well, let me back up. Between one of these two guitars, either the 58 footprint or the 81 footprint, but basically we're going to be building like a flat top Les Paul gold top that is a P90 equipped Explorer. So the reason, so I wanted to show this guitar right here, Ed, so that you can see this is just some gold that I mixed up. But the reason I show this is be thinking along the lines of what shade of gold you like, whether it's the dark or the kind of light silvery gold, because the sky's the limit. And typically on something like this, if I'm building a gold top for a client, I'm probably going to recommend, let's look at Stuart McDonald's gold, and because I think they have 3 different shades of gold, and just tell me which one of those that you're kind of thinking about, because when he and I were talking about his gold top Explorer replica with P90s, even trapezoid inlays, rosewood fretboard, Honduran mahogany neck, Honduran mahogany body with a fairly round neck profile. That guitar is actually going to be incredibly cool because I haven't built that yet. But it's so kind of funny because I was already thinking along those lines where this guitar right here is going to have the single Les Paul binding on the back and on the front. So basically, what we've done here with the single parchment cream-esque binding is very, very similar to what we'll be doing with Ed's guitar, but we're going to be going with a hard maple for Ed's guitar, and I did find some really beautiful hard maple over the weekend at Woodcraft that actually has some bird's eye in it. It's really beautiful, but that's irrelevant because we're definitely going to be painting it. So think about that, Ed, as far as gold goes. And, it's obviously, it's not like we're waiting on the guitar to be to be painted, so we got plenty of time there, but be thinking along those lines. But let's talk about this guitar a little bit. So, got the top epoxy down, and it was a really clean job. It's really beautiful. It turned out really well, and I obviously have done a lot of work since then, but still have, quite a ways to go. But I just want you to kind of take in what you want to see. Now, I'm going to be taking off just a very minimal amount of this top thickness right here. But the binding, the more I studied them, the binding is not like just 1/4 of an inch tall. This is over 1/4 of an inch in its height, but I think it's really beautiful as far as the percentage of binding versus the percentage of the mahogany. Really beautiful, coming together very tastefully. And what we see here, Ed, this is basically virtually identical to what your guitar would kind of look like from the back. I had that blue tape on there with the arrows, so I wouldn't forget to talk about that epoxy because that was such an important part of the last video, and I didn't get to talk about it. So anyway, it's turning out really good. And this is about... Again, I'm going to take just a little bit of material off this to get it perfectly true and level with the top thicknesses. But the guitar is basically going to end up being about 1 9/16 of an inch thick. And I don't want to do any more chemical wiping on this wood because if you're not careful, you'll start taking out a lot of the color of the wood. And I was studying a guitar builder that's a master level classical guitar builder. and they were studying one of his guitars that he had built back in the 70s. And that guy used to have a habit of soaking his all of his body wood for his acoustic classical guitars in acetone. And his theory was he wanted to draw out all of the, I think it's called lignin, and the oils from the wood and all that jazz, because the rosewood is a very oily wood. But in so doing, his guitars were always extremely light, and and everyone was like, "Oh yeah, they're beautiful," but in all actuality, actually no, they weren't. They were extremely unattractive because he had taken the acetone and killed basically the natural color of like the rosewood, the Brazilian rosewood he was building his guitars out of. So you have to be real careful with doing too much cleaning. Is where I'm going with this. So that's why I wanted to have that blue tape on there to make certain that I didn't have to clean a whole lot of epoxy out of the mahogany. Because when I build my guitars, even when they're in their rough state, being assembled in component form, they are very, very close to the actual finished guitar, and I don't have room to, make mistakes like excess chemical or either, and God forbid it happens like a router jumps and screws up a side or something like that, and it happens. But nonetheless, I'm so very happy with this guitar. It's so beautiful, and let's see what it weighs in comparison to what it weighed before it got epoxy together. Oh, not plugged in. I thought I took that off. Before, when it was in component form, it was 5.298 pounds. And right now, so we'll basically say it was 5.3 pounds. And right now, it is 5.336 pounds. And I don't remember I don't think I weighed it in grams when it was in component form, but it's 2,420 grams as a body, finished. And and the cool thing about that, one could basically just say, well, it's 38. What would it be in grams? I think that would be 38 ounces. Well, I don't know. Sorry, I'm losing myself there. But basically, it would be like 38 ounces, I guess. So is that considerable? No, it's immeasurable. So why? Because by the time it might have been that this got routed out, but I can't remember. Anyway, it's funny how you forget. I'm pretty certain this had not been routed out yet. So once this material, I know I had yeah, that's what it was. This had the tenon cut, but it had not been routed right here. So that's a little bit of weight in that maple right there. And then once I routed off the binding to receive the binding, well, then I added the binding back. So everything starts getting canceled out, basically. So even though the epoxy, I know there's additional weight there with the epoxy, by the time you machined this out and then did your binding, it basically is hovering right at 5.3 pounds. So, and the Fender Stratocaster body that I have, I think that's a 1981 or such. It's a heavy ash. It's 5.5 pounds. So there you have it. All right, let's get that off the table. And I say all that to say this: that's a really comfortable weight for a body footprint that is that big. And let's see what it sounds like. So if you got earbuds in, I'd recommend pulling them out, or if you have the volume up really high, especially if you have the earbuds in. I'm about to do a little bit of a tapping, and it's probably going to get fairly loud. All right, let's just start here down the tone bar. So we didn't hollow any of this out. We didn't hollow any of this out. And I'm not tapping very hard because A, I don't want to bang, I don't want to risk putting any dents in this maple. But I'll bang a little bit right in here. Pretty incredible. So, very, very vocal guitar. And it's cool. You hear these different notes. Well, they're fairly close. But nonetheless, I'd say job well done. And is there a target that you're looking for? No, you're just looking for solidity and a beautiful ringing tone. So, and the epoxy has been drying for maybe 4 or 5 days, give or take. I think today's Tuesday. So anyway, this binding was a bit of a bear, and I actually ended up buying a new heat gun because I'll shoot straight with you. If you don't do binding every day, it's not like riding a bicycle. It's more like riding a cafe racer motorcycle. You got to kind of get back in the saddle. So it turned out really well. Very happy with it. Okay, what do we want to talk about? I'm just going to try to keep this, honestly, a relatively short video. So I'm just going to kind of cover what has been done. Because at the end of the video, I want to talk about things that will help Ed as well in relation to the conversations that he and I had about, shaping a neck and neck profiles and stuff like that. So at the end of this video, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the difference between this, I'll just say the blue bit and the red bit. And what is it? It's a world of difference. So, and all it is just a very small variation in the radius. But I'll spend the end of the video talking about that stuff a little bit, and that might help Ed. And some of you guys out there that are obviously doing this kind of work. And there was a part of me that was tempted to actually jig this up, which I did cover this a little bit in the past video, where I would have this temporarily fastened so that everything's very true, and square. Whether I probably could put a square on this, and that would be perfectly true on a nice flat surface. But so with that said, I could put this in my jig and actually set it up so that I could come in here with a router bit and actually route out that area. But I don't see the point, because you run the risk in one little hiccup where you make a mistake. I don't want to make any mistakes. I like the idea of, I finally got the binding on there. I'm kind of moving into fifth gear, and everything's kind of on cruise control right now. And there's no sense in getting in a rush and trying to save 3 hours worth of handwork only to risk effing up your job. And that would be a nightmare, because there was an enormous amount of time it took, obviously, to get to this point. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know, I can't remember if in video 4 I had done this part yet, this machine work right here. So I won't talk about that, other than it just has to be machined to be obviously on the same 2-degree pitch. So once it goes into the body, well, you got a true guitar, simply put. And kind of what it boils down to is, I know I haven't had it. No, I didn't get a chance to talk about this type of stuff because I had not fit it yet, and I've still got just a little bit more fit work to do. But she is really, really close. But what is it all based on? The bridge height, which I talked about at roughly everything about where this bridge ends up as a playing guitar. Well, it just defines everything that you do down here. So much so that I actually built a jig, and so that I wouldn't risk drilling into this body, I built a small flat jig, and I put this in it, and I started assessing everything. Yeah, I do have. And when I say a jig, especially just a piece of poplar, and then I installed this, and then I put it where I wanted to visually see it, as well as what I was seeing with the number 74 81 Gibson. I wanted to see where was this bridge? Was it real low profile and flat to the body, or did it have some height to it? And it actually had some height to it. And that number ended up, what I saw in the pictures and what I saw once I made this look very similar to in the pictures, it ended up being my target of right at 19 millimeter at the D and the G string. So that was an awesome feeling to know that once this bridge goes on this body at a certain location, visually and physically, it's going to be functioning like a 1981, a Gibson Explorer. So with that said, then every bit of that just started determining the pitch. So, and I think I've already covered that a little bit, so I won't spend any time talking about that. I did change gears though, rather than epoxying this down. I was very concerned about, because this is such an unbelievably unforgiving footprint, and I know that sounds melodramatic, and I've already covered this. I'm not going to cover it again, but the whole idea about the relationship of everything in relation to the center line, well, I don't think you're ever going to find a guitar that's more difficult to build, especially around a pick guard, than this profile right here, this design right here, or I should say this footprint, because it's so absolutely critical that everything, once it went from component form, excuse me, into a body and a neck, I had to make certain that I was 100% beyond a shadow of a doubt, spot on, perfectly true to center. And I'll shoot straight with you. I did not trust myself to achieve that with epoxy. I feared this neck slipping into just the ever so slightest amount of a yaw creep, where the heel and tenon would have been fine, but that's irrelevant because the most important thing is the center line down this fretboard, period, and then making certain that this thing ended up, perfectly true to center line. So I'll say all that to say this: and I know Eric knew that as we were going into building this job. He was very much aware. This is not going to be like taking a Strat neck and just bolting it down to a Strat body or a Telecaster. Pick your poison, et cetera, et cetera. So, am I bragging? Maybe just a little bit, because once it all went together, my center line on my tape here, which is the center line of the fretboard, which is the center line of the string path, from the E to the E, is spot on, 100% perfect. And I would say it's within a 64th of an inch, but it's not. It's perfectly true. So I just say that to say this: I don't think I would have been able to have pulled that off with the epoxy, because you can't really tell what's going on, or you might get the upper part correct, and this down here might have slipped out a little bit, or just So with the tight bond, everything about when I was gluing this together, I was doing every bit of it by hand and just holding it until my tight bond started tacking. Then I clamped with some pretty serious pressure, got some of the squeeze out, cleaned it up, then let it sit there for just a second or two, and then immediately remove all the clamps. And then I assessed down the side of the trapezoidal path of the fretboard. I'll grab this. This is not what I used, but I just made certain that I assessed it as that tight bond was pretty much tacked to where it was not going to move again. And then I assessed it a third or fourth time and made certain that the flare that was on the treble side was the exact same dimension off the center line of the body as the flare off the bass side. And once I saw that had remained, I knew that I had a true guitar, and I was able to, just sight into here and see that my tenon had not moved. I was able to sight over here and see that I'm talking about the little maple part, had not slipped out or any of that kind of crap. And, I had a real nice protective block on the back here, so that once I reached under with my C clamp, because I did use two C clamps not because I wanted crushing pressure, but because I wanted to be able to control it. And then up here, I had a block of wood protecting, the fretboard. So, and the reason it would have taken 4 videos to have shown that operation, and I knew it would have been so much easier to just wait till this moment and just tell you why I changed gears, even though I'd made the statement about, probably I'm going to use the epoxy, et cetera, et cetera. But the whole idea about this neck, it is a 3-piece glued up neck, and it was glued up with a water-based woodworker glue, most likely a tight bond. And so if you don't see any sort of glue line on this, then you're not going to see, and that's glued up with a tight bond down the center line there. So it's an exceptional glue, and I'll drive it home one more time. This guitar would sound absolutely, probably bar none. Well, I'll say 99%. There's a 99% likelihood that this guitar is going to sound just as good if you glued it together with a tight bond as if with an epoxy. But I still want to epoxy it in, just because I know that there's a strong possibility it's going to sound just a little bit better. But nonetheless, we've got such a really good fitment on this right here that it could be glued in with a tight bond and sound very, very, very good. But if we epoxy it in, we'll be guaranteed that it's going to sound incredible. Okay, so let me check the time, and then we'll talk about. We'll figure something to talk about. 26 minutes. This might be a world record short video for me. So that's ready to be shaped. And how will I do that? I have no idea, other than I do know, like, if I was building just a neck that was like a S4S, lower, and then it had the heel on it that was already cut, I do know that the first thing you want to do is, I don't know if I've got a neck. Yeah, I got a neck right here. I'll show this neck. If this were an S4S, meaning it had not had any shape work done on it yet, well, once you got down to the heel, the first thing you do is go ahead and radius the heel, but make certain that if you're going to machine this off with a router, make certain that you leave your heel about 1/8 of an inch wider this way, minimum, at least 1/8 of an inch. Don't go 1/4 of an inch, but go about 1/8 of an inch wider than what you want your heel target to finish out at, so that once you come around and you're doing your routing work, you don't run the risk of this turning into a point. You want to maintain a little bit of a flat right there and a very beautiful defined arc. Why? Because that's predominantly seen in the Gibson designs, whether it's an Explorer, Flying V, an SG. I think I said Explorer. I'm not sure about their acoustics. That's irrelevant. But with that said, by having this design right here, I don't have this radius yet. So what I'm going to want to do, got too many guitars on the table. That should be fine right there. So what I'm going to want to do first, before I start doing any shaping, which all this shape work will be done by hand, is I could kind of take a chance and take a miter saw and just come down and just slice off little amounts and just kind of ease back. But the miter saws are dangerous, because if you're pulling the miter saw down and then you release the trigger, sometimes they'll jump down. It's the strangest thing. Or either maybe they jump up. I can't remember, but if you do that, make sure that you keep the miter saw going as you ease down. And man, I'm not even talking about getting close to the neck at all. All you're wanting to do is just rough out some of the mass. But don't try to rough out so much of the mass that you make the job real easy, because man, just one hiccup and you'll be painting it black rather than just tobacco fogged out. So anyway, this should be pretty easy to relieve. You could also put it on a table saw and do cross relief cutting, where you bring the table saw blade up, to about that height right there, and then you have some sort of a cross-cutting jig that you've designed, like a sled. Basically, it's a sled, and that's a real safe way of doing it. You could ease that amount off, and you could actually, if you're using a table saw, then you're guaranteeing that as you move closer in to the heel, well, then you just start dropping the height of the table saw blade so that once you make this relief, I'm talking about relief cuts. When you make these relief cuts back here, well, you're only going up maybe an eighth of an inch, and you're making certain that you're getting nowhere near your pencil line. And then you're going to be able to come in with your favorite shaping tool. And at my and I'm just addicted to these little rasps right here. That's a broken one. That was a straight rasp. I get these at Woodcraft, or I say I got these at Woodcraft about 26 years ago, and these are the original blades. Uh, had four. I had the round, had the triangle, and then I had the flat, but it's radiused on the back, which comes to a point. That's my favorite one. And then I had a straight one, but I was getting way too aggressive, and I broke it off. I can't remember. Well, I guess it broke out here because I knew that, well, all I'll have to do now is just epoxy it to a stick of wood. So I still got my straight for doing straight radius work or rasp work. But once I get all that relieved out, then I'll probably just be using this little rasp, coming in and doing the initial shape work. And don't let them fool you. They are hyper aggressive, and they're very effective. And then once you're down that low, you're going to be, well, if you've built guitars before, you're going to already know what your target is and whatnot, and just guaranteeing that you don't risk putting a gully right there, a low spot. Okay, so there you have it. So there's really no obviously single way to do it, but that's just the way I like doing it, and it works really well. One thing I will say, be careful with the 120 grit. You can do some 120 on the front end, but go to 220 as quick as you can once you're doing your final shape work. And also, this is one trick I learned just from doing restorations. Once you get down really close to the finished profile here, and you know you're getting very close to now blending it into uh, the original, once you're all the way down to this bottom, go ahead and I'll just put it where it's going to stop. And then keep in mind, all this is already out of the way, so you're going to be able to tape off wherever you see the dark original lacquer. Just put the blue tape there, and then start doing your sanding work on your maple, and then working it over into the blue tape, and then and then you'll see the blue tape start to blend with the maple and kind of start getting sanded off. And then once you see the blue tape begin to feather out and lose its mill thickness, or I don't know, I guess it would be considered mill thickness. Well, then remove the tape, put some more tape down, and keep doing your sand work. That will guarantee that once you're truly very close to finishing your heel, you still have not shaped it into the original yet, but you don't want to be doing that until you know that you're almost finished with the job. Then you can remove your tape, do your feather sanding with the 220 briefly, go to 400 grit, something like that, very quickly. And then the 400 grit should be fine once you see this original dark epoxy begin to fade a little bit. You're there. Okay. And should you allow it to sit for a week or so you don't risk shrinking? That might not be a bad idea. So in other words, if you had have just bought this wood, and then you maybe it was really rainy in the car coming home, and it soaked in a little bit of moisture, and you did all this shape work, you probably would get yourself in trouble in about a week, where it then started drying and shrinking. But this maple has been in my basement shop for how long? When did I get this? I can't remember. It's been over a month and a half, 2 months. So it was already kiln dried. It came from Woodcraft, but just proceed with caution. I've seen a lot of mistakes right there that they probably did beautiful work, but then 3 weeks later, 3 months later, the piece where they glued them together shrank, and just showed, it revealed itself. And worst case scenario, if something like that happened, it's not really a big deal at all because you could just do some feather sand work and then shoot some nitro over it and just kind of let it level out. And then I'm not saying Eric's going to have to do this at all because I'll be keeping this guitar for like another month and a half, even after it's glued in, as we're doing the lacquer work and letting all this cure. Okay, all right, I'm getting too long-winded, but just proceed with caution and take your time and go real slow, and and as I used to say all the time, work your way to the finish line. So go to Woodcraft, get yourself some rasps. I think these ended up being about $15 each, but quite frankly, I would pay a lot more for them for what it is you can do with them. All right, now so we've already done the tap tone. We've talked about. I don't think there's really any need to talk about doing the router work because I talked about that in the last video, and I still have not radiused off this back edge right here because I like the idea that it can get damaged. I'm glad I brought that up off the cuff. However, something that is absolutely, bar none, probably one of the most important things you could do. Whatever this dimension is right here, and this basically is a finished guitar, I have got to guarantee that I protect this edge because I'm getting ready to do a 1/8 inch radius roundover on the back per Gibson specs. And I don't think I'll forget, but let me put this over here and it'll remind me to talk about electronics, and then I'll go, oh yeah, I forgot about that. But I don't want to get off topic here. When you're getting ready to do this route job, this basically should just be I'd say it should be like a 2 to 3 pass job because you want to really ease into making certain that you don't get too low, but you want to get low enough that you create a true radius. Now, my router base is not round because I built a 3/8 inch thick, I think it's like 5 inches wide by 12 inches long, a rectangular base, so that I can allow that large rectangular base to float back there and really guarantee that when I come out here, I don't risk tipping. So with that said, so I'm not worried about tipping and screwing anything up, especially out here. So I'll be coming in right here, making this cut, and I should be okay to do a push cut all the way around the body. But since I'm going to flush out the back of this heel, it is so incredibly important that I don't risk screwing that up. Now, there's a part of me that, and I probably will do this, I probably will not even do this radius work until this is all glued in and finished, and that'll guarantee that once I come up here, I don't risk losing this little corner right here on either side. And the last thing you want to do is, if you were rounding, okay, let's keep talking hypothetical for a while. Let's say you were planning, this is probably one of the most important parts of this entire video. Let's say you were going to build your heel. Just put it where it's supposed. So it's what I call a stepped heel. And actually, that would be more historically accurate with this design. Probably, that probably is about what it would be. It's a little bit over. It's probably about 3/16 of an inch. So you're thinking, okay, well, this is awesome. So I'm just going to crank up the router and buzz around this whole job, and it'll be awesome. Well, it'll be awesome as long as you don't let the bearing fall down into that right there. And that actually happened to me once, about 25 years ago, and that was the last time it ever happened. And it was mortifying to watch my beautiful Honduran mahogany body get this football size, just horrific rip out right there. Let's see what would happen with this. See, it would be dangerously. It probably you probably wouldn't. It probably would not happen to you on this. No, it wouldn't. But it would be you would be skirting that bearing up across 1/16 of an inch of a flat. In other words, if you were getting ready to do just a radius edge around the whole back side, that's where I'm going with this. However, uh, when you're doing this binding work right here, one of the very most important things, and that's I did not forget because I was getting ready to talk about electronics, is the last thing you want to do in building the guitar is drill this large 7/8 inch hole to put the jack through, because I can guarantee you that, and that has happened to me also just once a long time ago, where I was routing for the binding after I had drilled a hole in the body. Not any of the Explorer replicas, excuse me, because this happened like 26 years ago. No, probably like 23, 24 years ago. But if you had this large hole right here, when you're routing for your binding, so your bearing has got to run very low, and I can guarantee you that if you drill this hole and then do your binding, and you don't plug it with something, I guarantee you will get into your top, and it will bore up into it, however deep the bearing falls up into the pocket right there, and it's probably pretty catastrophic, because when it happened to me, I think I went up into the maple probably about 3/16 of an inch. And what was so sad is everything was going great, but I wasn't watching, and all of a sudden I felt it felt different, and I felt it wanting to go in a different direction because it was following the path of least resistance, which was the hole for the output jack. So always remember, when you're doing all this pre-machine work and you're thinking, oh, okay, I'm going to go ahead and just drill for the output jack, don't do it. Don't do it. No matter how good you are, if you forget, you'll lose a beautiful top, or it'll force you to prove how good you are about making a repair. And we don't want that. So a little bit of theory there for you, and that again, I wish I could say that was hypothetical, but it actually was an experience that I suffered through. Okay, so this heel will be flush. Oh, I'm sorry. What I was going to say, I got too long-winded. You could just cut a little sacrificial block of wood. And okay, let's say you really wanted to do all of your clear coat work while you're waiting on some other parts. Then I would say let's go ahead and radius this edge here, because there is a part of me I want to go ahead and start sealing this mahogany. Yeah, I'm kind of processing through the job myself. I probably am going to go ahead and do this before I put the heel in. And I'm talking about the 1/8 inch radius around the whole body perimeter, but I got to make certain that when I come around this corner that I come straight out. And I trust myself, with a router, that I know as soon as that bearing is coming out here, I'm just going to go straight out. But one slip up and you'll be doing a little patch up. But if you just put some masking tape here on the end, and then put some masking tape here and use your CA glue, and you'll have to cut the length of this little block the same length here, then that'll be sacrificial, so that your router bit will now, whatever I did with the router bit, I think I'll put it back in this. It disappeared, yeah. Then once the router bit comes off, it'll just go into your piece of poplar. And then you can remove the poplar, but make certain that when you do that, that you actually then are ready to go ahead and do your clear coat work. So let me check the time. All right, so I'm 44 minutes. I'm going to pause the camera, and I'm going to do exactly what I just said, and I'm going to go over there, and I'm going to route every bit of this, and hopefully before the 60-minute mark, we're going to have the nitrocellulose lacquer out, and I'm going to go ahead and seal this guitar. I think, but I take that back. I forgot about something. the back of this body is kind of scratched up from me doing a lot of tabletop work. So before you seal this with nitrocellulose lacquer, even though I'm so anxious to get that part of the job done, what I've got to do, yeah, this sucks. I'm going to have to bridle myself, and I can go ahead and do the radius work, which I will, but then what I'm going to do is rather than sealing it with nitrocellulose lacquer, I'm going to give the Honduran Mahogany a bath with water, with a cloth, and just really saturate it fairly wet, so that any of these scratches that are in this body, it'll kind of swell up, and then tomorrow I'll be ready to come back with my 220 and start smoothing her out, and then she'll be ready to start receiving some lacquer. So anyway, so let me pause, and I'll go ahead and do that part of the job, and then we'll give it a bath, and then call it a video. And then before I do that, I got myself off track. Ed, and I'll cover this in future videos, and I'll shoot you a text and let you know. But basically, if you're wanting more of like the round profile, let's see what this is. And as you can tell, guys, I don't have a plan. I didn't have a list that I was going to work by. It's pretty close to a 7. This is a 7/8 inch radius, and this is a 1 inch radius. I used the 7/8 inch radius for the initial machine work, not the finish. It's pretty close to finish. But see, once you get up here, I don't know if I can show this on the camera. I'll do the best I can to show it. But once you get up here on Eric's guitar, which is a Gibson, that up there, that's 1 inch. And see, there it is. That's 1 inch. Therein, that's why I started using the 1 inch radius bit on doing all of my machine work. But Ed was talking about playing Eric's SG that I built, and he said, yeah, it felt a little bit, to me, it felt more like kind of like a D. And the fact that he got to play that guitar, and he wasn't complaining about it, but it wasn't really the neck he wanted. Even though this Gibson here is showing a 1 inch radius right there, and it is showing a 7/8 inch radius down here. So I say that to say this, as far as in reference to either building your guitar or for Ed directly, I would recommend we machine your neck with the 7/8 inch radius, even though it's too round down here. Yeah, top and bottom. Even though it's more of a 1 inch radius from like right here back, at a minimum, I say that we should start your job with a 7/8 inch radius and start out about 15/16 inch thick at the first fret. And typically I'm 7/8 inch thick at the first fret, but I would say we start out 15/16 inch thick at a minimum, possibly 1 inch. If you really want a 58 Explorer with a not a baseball bat, but you reading between the lines, I know you know what I'm talking about because we got to talk about it in detail. We can build a pretty substantial neck, but once we get up to the 11th fret, I don't want this to be if it is over an inch, I want it to be almost immeasurable, because that's the way that the 58, 59 would have been even up here. They would not have been, super thick up here. So there's nothing wrong with leaving it fairly thick down here and a real nice round profile. But once you get up here, you don't want it to feel like a wheelbarrow, So there's a strong possibility that we'll do all the machine work with for your guitar, Ed, with a 7/8 inch initial machine work, and then I'll be doing every bit of the final shape work by hand with blocks and whatnot, but shaping it closer to 1 inch radius back here at a minimum, at least up on the top. So we got a ways to go there. And also, as far as for your guitar, Ed, if you've got a neck like a Fender Strat neck that's just a neck that you just adore, man, you're welcome to send me that neck, and then I can mic everything and then reproduce that and then send the neck back to you. So, but excuse me, but I got a really good feel as to what it is we're both talking about. Basically, you just want like a 7/8 inch radius round profile down here, and probably a little bit thicker than what's going on here, because this one is 7/8 of an inch thick at the first fret, and we probably want to be a little bit, probably right at 15/16 of an inch thick at yours. And then worst case scenario, if you hated that guitar, you could have a Pro Tech, shape it down a little bit, but I think we'll probably be able to hit it pretty much exactly what you want. Okay, so we got to talk about that just enough, at least to let Ed know I can. And Ed and I already had this conversation, but I've covered that in an extensive amount of detail in past videos, and I wouldn't have a clue where to send you. So let me pause and do some router work, and then we'll give it a bath and go from there. Okay, I'll go ahead and show this. It's pretty straightforward. But what I did, I went ahead, there's masking tape on the back side of that piece of poplar, and then obviously I'm going to be temporarily gluing that to the back right there. It's the sacrificial. But I took advantage of the time, and I went ahead and set up my router over there and with the radius bit, and I used this little piece of poplar, and I just did a test cut, and I laid it down like this right here. So the bearing ran along this edge, and it gave me a short test cut as to what I can expect to see once I pull the trigger and do the route job. So with that said, now I'll just put some jet glue. I call it jet glue because I used to buy this glue from a guy who was a professional model. He actually owned a professional RC model shop, and he built really incredible jets and all that type of stuff. He was at a really high-end shop. Very cool guy. I was over in Birmingham, Alabama. This was back in circa 96, 95, and I used to buy that CA glue from him, and it was called jet glue. And you had jet medium, you had jet thin, you had jet thick. So I just got accustomed to always calling it jet glue, because he was building jets with it, and then also because it's rocket fast. So that's where the whole jet glue thing comes from. Glasses off, can't see. Got a little bit high on that side. Not too bad though. It will screw me out though. Let me pause and file that down a little bit because I don't want to waste the time. Okay, this shouldn't take but just a moment, but you can see how obviously you're not glued in this area right here, but by gluing in that perimeter right there, I'm not going to break it off, because if I really tugged on it, it would just come loose. But it's plenty strong enough. I mean, I'm putting some pretty serious pressure on that to, even if you were doing like really heavy duty routing, that's plenty to allow that bearing to ride and you to maintain control of whatever it is that you're doing. And that's exactly how I typically do my heel as well. I will put masking tape right there on the heel, and I will temporarily, substantially bigger than that, but about that same width, I will temporarily attach a sacrificial block right there. And then when I'm doing my neck building and I come off of this, that guarantees that bearing continues to ride along the block. I know most of you guys watching this video know that type stuff, but if there's one or two of you guys out there that are you're pretty good with hand tools, but you just bought a brand new router and you're all excited about building a guitar. It's the little things like that that will keep you from, losing your job, because that will guarantee that that block gives the bearing something to ride on, regardless of how big the bit may be. So let me pause, go route this whole perimeter, and then, as I said, we'll give it a bath. So might use that as the screenshot. Try to capture a good. And speaking of that, I did not get a good picture for the screenshot, so I need to go ahead and pause though, because I'm probably about to lose the camera time. Okay, let's take a brief moment and see what you can expect to achieve on just on a single pass. I probably could drop the router bit just a little bit lower, but you can see where I routed up here and stopped and left the S4S, and then I came over here and went into the body from this side, routed that edge right there, went ahead and came around the body all the way up to that point, stopped right there, just for demonstration purposes. Then moved the router over and just came back in, obviously just to show you guys on camera what you can expect as you're working with the mahogany. So it just cuts like cotton candy. It's so incredible. I could drop this bit a little bit more. I'm going to, but not on camera, because if you drop the bit any lower and I say that, if you just went just a little bit lower and you created just a little bit of a drop cut, that's no big deal, because you're going to be coming in here and leveling the back, but you don't want to screw up and it truly drop like a I think it's called an overload joint. So anyway, let me pause, finish the route work, and then I most likely will just finish the job off later on with sandpaper. But so far it's really beautiful. It's coming together really well and takes shape just like that. Okay, I went ahead and intentionally dropped the bearing, or dropped the bit just a little bit lower, and achieved exactly what I said. See that little bit of a step? And you might think, oh man, then you went too far. No, because there's certain places where it's absolutely perfect. So what does that tell you? That the body is at this point not perfectly flat, and it was going to have a little bit of additional sanding required anyway. And the way I'll be sanding that, let's see if I can find my sanding block. StewMac Maple Radiusing Block 120. Do not do circular, do not do cross grain. Sand with the grain,